Will the real Kushites please stand up? By Biblical DNA. Fair use. Fair use is a legal doctrine that promotes the freedom of expression by permitting the unlicensed use of copyright-protected works in certain circumstances. Alright, this is a supposed location of the Garden of Eden. We see it as ancient Mesopotamia, also known as part of the Fertile Crescent. You have the marshlands, which would overflow due to heavy rains in the rivers. It would cause overflowing in the marshlands. Alright. This is a mapping depiction by Dora Jane Hublin in the paper called Has the Garden of Eden Been Located at Last? Alright, this is the depiction of the kingdom of Nimrod. So Nimrod was the founder of Babel or Babylon, Sumer, the land of Shinar, and Akkad. Alright, descendants of Kush, Dedan, Sheba. Alright, I have the kingdom of Kush. What we know is connected to Upper Egypt, part of North Sudan, also known as Nubia. Alright, these are key biblical verses that I thought was important to share. Alright, so you can use your translation. I'm using the Young's literal translation. So Genesis chapter 1, verses 28 through 29. And God blessed them, and God said to them, Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over fish of the sea, and over fowl of the heavens, and over every living thing that is creeping upon the earth. And God saith, Lo, I have given to you every herb sowing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree sowing seed to you. It is for food. Genesis chapter 2, verse 13. And the name of the second river is Gibeon, also known as Gihon. It is that which is surrounding the whole land of Kush. Chapter 10, verse 6 through 12. And the sons of Ham are Cush, Mitzrayim, and Phut, and Canaan. And the sons of Cush are Sebia, and Havilah, and Sabta, and Ramah, and Sabteka. And sons of Ramah are Sheba and Dedan. And Cush hath begotten Nimrod, and he hath begun to be a hero in the land. He had been a hero in hunting before Yahweh. Therefore it is said, as Nimrod the hero in hunting before Yahweh, and the first part of his kingdom is Babel, and Erech, and Echad, and Halnah, in the land of Shinar. And from that land he hath gone out to Asher, and buildeth Nineveh, even the broad places of the city of Calah, and Rezin, between the Nineveh and Calah, it is the great city. Alright, Genesis 11, 1 through 9, so it's basically the Tower of Babel. So, I'm not going to read this, but if you want to take a chance and just pause this video and read them, it's basically the Tower of Babel and how it was built up, and how the people lost their pronunciation of how to say, speak their language, so they were scattered. Alright. Exodus chapter 2, verse 3. And she hath not been able any more to hide him, and she taketh for him an ark of rushes, and Duboth, and with bitumen, and with pitch, and putteth the lade in it, and putteth in the weeds by the edge of the river. So if you look at the Young's translation for or the Strong's, you can see that the river is Nile. So it doesn't say the Gihon. It doesn't say, the river Kush. It says the Nile. And that's very important because a lot of people say this specific river represents the river of Kush or the river of Gihon, which is incorrect. All right, we're going to jump all the way to Isaiah chapter 18, verse 2. That is sending by sea ambassadors, even with implements of reed on the face of the waters. Go ye, light messengers, unto a nation drowned out and peeled, unto a people fearful from its beginning and onwards, a nation meeting out by line and treading down, whose land floods have spoiled. So the importance of this is the concept of flooding. So if it's talking about the Nile flooding, okay, that was used for good harvesting, same as the marshlands. So if these people were the same descendants that originally came from the marshlands of Iraq and settled in northern Sudan, upper Egypt, that would make sense, that the similarities of using overflooding of the river. All right, go to Ezekiel 27, verse 10. Persian and Lud and Foot have been in thy forces, thy men of war, shield and helmet, they hung up in thee. They have given out thine honor. All right. Go to Ezekiel 38 and 5. And just these two verses are just showing the similarities. So that time Cush wasn't involved, but this time you'll see he is going to be involved. Persia, Cush, and Foot with them, and all of them with shield and helmet. Ezekiel 30, 45. And come and hath a sword to Egypt, and there hath been great pain in Cush, and the falling of the wounded in Egypt, and they have taken its store, and broken it down have been its foundations. Cush and Foot and Lud, and all the mixture, and Chub, and the sons of the land of the covenant, with them by the sword do fall. All right. Last is the book of Yasher, chapter 27. When you just get a chance, if you want to, you can just pause and just read the whole book of Jasher, chapter 27. It's interesting. It's the whole concept of Esau, fighting Nimrod. So if you get a chance, just read that. All right, so in Ezekiel, this is a depiction in the tomb of Xerxes first, shaped as a cross. And we see the nations that was involved in it. You look at the bottom to the right, it has Ethiopian by the Libyan, which is Foot. But I believe that's a misconception with the concept of Ethiopian. It was actually just supposed to be Kush. The word Ethiopia comes from the Greeks. The Greeks called people of dark skin Ethiopians, or Ethiopians, or Ethiop. Alright, this is the same depiction. And you notice the only one it looks the features that it has is this Kushite by the North African, by the Libyan. It's got the woolly hair. It's the only one on here with woolly hair. Alright, this is from Evaluation of DNA Conservation in the Nile-Saharan Environment, Missiminia in Nubia, tracking the maternal lineage of X group. So hunting, gathering, domestication, non-intensive agriculture, just the breakdown. But the timelines we're focusing on is the Meritic, the X group, and the Christian. Alright, so I got the Tomb of Darius, first soldier of the empire, so it's the same concept. As you can see, the only one that has the features it does, which they call Ethiopians, but I told you that Ethiopia comes from the Greeks. And it's the only person that has woolly hair, which they would call as a Negroid feature. Alright, so I have Clyde Ahmed Winters. I don't really subscribe to his teaching. He had an interesting concept where he tried to say that the Kushite spread of haplogroup R1's asterisk dash M173 from Africa to Eurasia. If you want to, you can look up his work. Like I said, I don't really subscribe to it. I mean, it is worth, looking at, but it's not something that I would really, take as 100%. I mean, there might be a little bit of truth and could be explained why haplogroup R-V88 isn't in Africa, but I don't entirely think it is. So, I mean, like I said, these are two of the papers that he wrote regarding haplogroup R1 being the Kushites, the spread of the Kushite. So, yeah. Alright, some statues. Cushitic statues. Found these ones interesting with their phenotypes. And some pottery. Nimrod pottery. Okay, so this is the language breakdown of that's classified linguist family of Afro-Asiatic that I thought it was important to look at. So we see that these languages are supposedly Cushitic, but we're going to actually see if that's the case, if it's based off of Kush from the Bible, or, if it's something that, white Christian believers their attempts to try to put, oh, well, these people in Ethiopia, the Beja, that they're all descendants of Kush, because that's the whole concept that, black people were descendants of Kush, or East Africans were descendants of Kush. But we're going to see if this linguistic sub-family group is actually talking about like the Kush from the Bible. Alright, so Cushitic, we have the breakdown here. This is exactly what they say. Armo is the only one that's like broken off from the rest. They claim it's a separate language group. Oromo is thus after Arabic, Hausa, and Swahili, the African language with the largest number of speakers, but it became a written language only in 1975 with the publication of the first Oromo periodical in Ethiopian script. Pre-Axumite culture developed in part due to a South Arabian influence, evident in the Axumite use of ancient South Arabian script and the practice of ancient Semitic religion. That's taken from Munro Hay Stewart, 1991, Aksum, an African civilization of late antiquity, pages 61 through 62. All right. Ancient South Arabian derives from Proto-Semitic script. In Ethiopian Etere, it evolved later into the Gez script. Daniels, Peter T. Bright Williams, 1996, The World's Writing Systems, Oxford University, pages 89, 98, 569 through 570. And this is Greg Jean Gez, Axum, and Woodward Roger, the Cambridge Encyclopedia of World's Ancient Languages, page 431. Alright, so this is the breakdown of the Semitic scripts of the Old South Arabian scripts, Old North Arabian scripts, and we see that it's the Gez or the Ethiopic comes from the Old South Arabian scripts. Alright, it's the end of the slide. So this same. Alright. Now I want to go to the PDF. Alright. This is I think it's a book or a chapter by Peter Unseth, Hebrew Kush, Sudan, Ethiopia, or where? Question mark. Alright, if you scroll down to, I want to say, page 140, 150? 150. The word Cushitic is used today by linguists to designate a group of languages in Eastern Africa. Most of these are in Ethiopia and almost none are in Sudan. But this use of the label Cushitic by present-day linguists has absolutely no bearing on the translation of the Hebrew Kush. So what I interpreted as this has nothing to do with Kush, the biblical Kush, and the kingdom of Kush that was in northern Sudan or below Upper Egypt. So it's a pretty good read. I gained a lot of knowledge from this. So when you get a chance, just download it. Take a chance to download it. Scroll up so you can get the article. Alright, so this is the ancient languages of Mesopotamia and Egypt and Axum. So if you go up, it's backwards. So alright, got as Axum historical background. This 3rd century Manichaean text shows the reputation enjoyed at, let me get this zoomed in for y'all, sorry about that, at least sporadically by the shadowy East African kingdom, which was just over the horizon of the known classical universe, and which, from time to time, impinged on the consciousness of the world of late antiquity. Its capital city, Aksum, was located near the northern edge of the great Ethiopian plateau, which rises abruptly behind the Red Sea coast, a mirror image to the coastal escarpment on the Yemeni side and slopes down gently into East Africa, its steep southeast flank forming the northern wall of the Great Rift Valley in Africa. The kingdom of Aksum itself arose toward the end of the 2nd century AD and continued to play an important role in the region until the rise of Islam. But prior to that, the region of Aksum had been the site of a South Arabian colony centered at Ye'a, about 30 kilometers east of Aksum. Paleographically dated to around 500 BC by monumental inscriptions of the classical Sabian type. Presumably, given the intensely commercial orientation of the South Arabian city-states and the geographical proximity, Arabia and the Horn of Africa are separated by only 40 kilometers in the Bab el-Mandab Straits at the southern end of the Red Sea. Contacts based on trade relations go back even further. It is clear that many of the political and the cultural traditions of the kingdom stemmed out of this colonization or its antecedents. And linguistically, as will be seen, Ethiopic Semitic is a close cousin of Old South Arabian. However, it is not possible to derive Ethiopic Semitic or any of its consonant branches and languages from any single attested form of Old South Arabian. All right, linguistic history. Classical Ethiopic in the language of Aksum, whose self-designation is Gaez. The etymology, uncertain, is presumably derived from one or more forms of South Semitic brought from Yemen, probably in the first half of the first millennium BC. In all likelihood, the Ethiopic Semitic evolved out of a South Arabian-based trade lingua franca, perhaps passing through stages of Pignization and creolization, familiar from differentiation and development of languages or language families elsewhere in the world, e.g. Romance. So I'm saying like the Latin languages. The substratum languages in this, back up, development presumably belong to the Cushitic language family, and a number of important early loan words from Cushitic are evident in Gaez, but at present it is not possible to reconstruct the mechanisms of this development. Gaez disappeared as a spoken language probably sometime before the 10th century AD, but continued as the liturgical language of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church as the only official written language of Ethiopia practically up to the end of the 19th century. All right. Alright. Let's see if there's anything else I want to read from here, if this was it. Alright, the inhabitants. Let me see. Page 47. So this is Aksum and the African civilization of late antiquity, Stuart Monroe. So I think it said 47, but I think, let me see, I got something right here. Role titles on inscription tests to Aksum's claim to control the attachment area of some of these exports, including parts of such neighboring regions as the Old Kushite or Meroitic kingdom, the lands of the Nubia and Baja peoples, other now unidentifiable African districts, and even parts of South Arabia. All right, let's see. Pretty sure that's the only thing I had in port. There we go. The original use of the Greek designation Ethiopia was either as a general designation for the black people south of the Egyptian border, as the Arabs later used al-Habasha, or its plural Abashish, for groups like the Zanje, Baja, and the Nubians, as well as the Abyssinians, Talmachev, 1986, or more specifically as a reference to the kingdom of Kush, or Kasa, with its capital at Meroe, on the Sudanese Nile. Thus, the mentions of Kush in the Bible have been attributed to Aksumite Ethiopia instead of Meroitic Cushitic or Kushite Ethiopia by those Christian interpreters determined to bestow a long and prominent tradition beginning with Cush, grandson of Noah, on their country. You see what I'm saying? Let's read that again. Thus, the mentions of Cush in the Bible have been attributed to Aksumite Ethiopia instead of Meroitic Kushite Ethiopia by those Christian interpreters determined to bestow a long and prominent tradition beginning with the Cush, the grandson of Noah, on their country. So, it was pushed on them like that. The whole Kush concept was pushed on Ethiopia, but we know that it was in northern Sudan, and the whole concept of Ethiopia represented burnt faces. So, I mean, to sit there and say all black people was related is just complete nonsense. Probably have more stuff. I don't know, but whatever. The inhabitants, the population of the Aksumite villages probably resemble closely the inhabitants of the present-day Semitic speakers in the central region, Aksumites Habash, owing something of their cultural tradition to influences from South Arabia in earlier times, with the Cushitic speaking peoples on the peripheries of the kingdom. Um, oh, peripherals. I don't know what that word is. Peripheries. I think that's it from this one. Do got more. This one's saying about India and Sri Lanka, how it's all connected. This text is huge. I think how I found this one is I think Clyde Winters actually cited this source. And I mean, it's a lot of information in it. The Baja are the tribes of Red Sea Hills. The Nuba are the peoples of the Nubian kingdoms. And the Kusha, the Kushites or Marites. See, why aren't the Baja related to the Kushites or the Marites? That I just find that interesting, but they speak a Cushitic language. It makes absolutely no sense, according to linguists, which just made up the damn word. Alright, I think that's it. Yeah. Alright, getting into some genetics. So the genetic heterogeneity among the Negroid and the Arab tribes of Sudan. So basically, in this article is trying to show how they had features of Negroid and Asian and non-Asian, Caucasian genetics or elements. The other major cluster is composed of two subclusters. One is formed by the Fur, and two supposedly by Arab tribes, Hawazma and Mazara of the Sudan. The other is represented by the Nilotes and the Nuba of the Sudan, along with the Sandwa of Tanzania. The later cluster is of a Negro nature, while the former cluster represents mainly Asian and non-Asian Caucasoid elements. The only expected result of genetic descent analysis is that of the Hawazama and the Mizrahi tribes of Sudan, who claim an Arab origin. The sample sizes of these two tribes are inadequate, and it appears that they have a greater degree of Negroid and mixture than the other Arab tribes of Sudan. Alright. Though an indigenous Negro tribe have acquired a high proportion of Arab genes, probably as a result of intermarriage. Alright. Into page 8. Alright, Northeast African genomic variation shaped by the continuity of indigenous groups and Eurasian migrations. Make sure I don't miss anything. Some stuff, I just be highlighting stuff, just going through these documents, skimming through them, because it's just so much. When you go through so many documents, like, you just read so much. And it's like, man, some stuff you just don't care. You just want to get to the points, to the main points that's important. Alright, so the Beni Amir also showed a strong admixture signal with a Eurasian population, as well as a shared ancestry component with the Somali population, which suggests admixture with the East African Cushitic speaking populations, perhaps as a result of migration along the coast. I just brought up this one just because I felt like it's important to show that there's been admixtures and whatnot. Go ahead and read this conclusion. We have shown that there has been long-term migration into Sudan. Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, that's true. Moving in a southward direction, possibly along the Nile and the Blue Nile. From historic documents, we know that the ancient Egyptians were in contact with the ancient Nubians. Ancient Nubians, or Kermites, or Kushites, that inhabited the Nile area in the north of modern-day Sudan. Our study suggests that the later migration followed along the Nile, likely being held up by the Nubians until the fall of the kingdom of Makara in the 14th century. Following that historic event, the Arab expansion spread further southward, which can be seen in a succession of admixture events that occur more recent in time as one travels south. Many populations in Sudan that self-identify as Arab display a population history of local Sudanese populations that have admixed with incoming Eurasian populations and adapted the language and culture of the incoming migrations. In fact, most populations from northeast Sudan, Nubian, Arab, and Beja groups seem to be an admixture of Middle Eastern and local Northeast African genetic components, although only the Arab group shifted to the Semitic groups or languages. Cultural and linguistic replacement following the Arab conquest has been described previously in populations of the Maghreb. The Eurasian admixture had less impact on the populations of Western Sudan and South Sudan. The Darfurian In the Kordofan populations showed overall less admixture from non-African groups than the northeastern populations, and the limited admixture that does exist is more recent in time. The Neolithic populations have stayed largely unmixed, admixtured, which appears to be the case in Ethiopia too, where a similar observation has been made for the Gumas, an Ethiopian Neolithic population that is generally similar to South Sudan Neolites. In Northeast Africa, Neolites showed some distinction from an ancient Ethiopian individual, Mota, found in the Mota cave in southern Ethiopian highlands, which suggests population structure between Northeast and Eastern Africa already 4,500 years ago. The modern-day Neolithic groups are likely direct descendants of past populations living in Northeast Africa many thousands of years ago. Whew, okay. Alright, a lot of highlight in this one. Semitic languages outline of a comparative grammar by Edward Lipinski. Part 1 is introductory. It situates the Semitic languages in the wider context of the Afro-Asiatic or Hamato-Semitic language family, the 5 main branches of which are Semitic, Ethiopian, Cushitic, Libico, Berber, and Cushitic. In the Semitic group, the single languages of which are briefly described include such languages of antiquity as Paleo-Syrian, Old Akkadian, Assyrio-Babylonian, Hebrew, Phoenician, Aramaic, and epigraphic South Arabian, as well as Arabic, Neo-Aramaic, and the contemporary languages of Ethiopia and Eritrea. A broader interrelationship was first recognized by Thea Benfi in his sole work on Semitic linguistics, Über das Verständnis der Ägyptischen Approach zum Semitischen Sprachman, where he expresses the opinion that also Berber and Ethiopic, i.e. Cushitic, in his terminology belong to the same large family tree or language family. The designation Cushitic was introduced by 1858. This is important right here, y'all. I did a video on the founding fathers of the Afro-Asiatic family classification, and yeah, this is part of it. The designation of Cushitic was introduced by 1858. An entire language family was named Hamato-Semitic in 1876 by Friedrich Müller in his Grundriss der Sprache, where Müller describes the concerned group of languages. J.H. Greenberg, he's a Jew, instead considering that this is the only language family represented in both Africa and Asia, proposed to call it Afro-Asiatic in his work, The Languages of Africa, issued in 1963. So who? J.H. So Joseph Greenberg, he's a Jew. Mueller wasn't a Jew, and they didn't see eye to eye. Since Egyptian is linked by evident lexical and more graphical isoglosses with Semitic, Libico, Berber, Chadic, Cushitic, is unlikely that it could have derived from common Afroasiatic before the latter and developed its verbal system. Alright. There is as yet little agreement concerning the identification and classification of these languages that are spoken from the Red Sea littoral, or what is that? Littoral to the areas south of the Horn of northeastern Africa. Cushitic preserves some archaic Afroasiatic features in syntax as verbal aspects, ergative, and the non-active cases of the noun inflection, the causative, passive, and reflective. Just zoom this stuff in. Ready to go. The pronominal elements in the basic vocabulary often show close relationship to Semitic. Instead, Cushitic is not related to the Macro-Sudanic languages, which is important. That's important. Which were used and written in northern Sudan. Nilotic, a still imperfectly understood language, which is attested from the 3rd century BC to the 5th century AD, and the Old Nubian, which is known from Christian writings dating from the end of the 8th century to the 14th century, and which is continued by the modern Nubian dialects of the Nile Valley and of the Kordofan Hills. Now that's important, y'all, because you see how these so-called Cushitic languages ain't got nothing to do with Northern Sudan, with the actual Cushitic language that was speaking in the Kingdom of Kush. Why is that? Why aren't they related? Why aren't these so-called Cushitic languages related to the language that was speaking in the Kingdom of Kush? That makes absolutely no sense. Because just like Peter said in the other document that I had up, is that it ain't had nothing to do with it ain't had nothing to do with that. The Cushitic language ain't got nothing to do with it. Ain't got nothing to do, has no bearing to the Hebrew Kush. This is where I was at. Yeah, that's it. That's what I read. These languages are spoken in Eritrea, and in northwestern Ethiopia, in a region where Semitic influence has been relatively strong. The Aga people are believed to have once occupied most of the highland Ethiopia. Their present scattered distribution must be the result of the Semitic expansion in this area. Contrary to a Somali tradition, there is no reason to believe that their ancestors arrived from Arabia, although the Arabic Peninsula was the origin of an increasing immigration, probably from the 8th century AD onwards, as well as the source of the Islamization of Somalia. Among the Almatic dialects, which are considered by some scholars as a distinct branch of Afroasiatic. Distinct, that's what I brought up earlier, but it don't have nothing to do with Cushitic. It's its own separate. I mean, it has nothing to do with Cushitic either, because Cushitic has nothing to do with the Kingdom of Kush and the languages they were speaking there. Alright, this is the breakdown of Proto-Afroasiatic, of how they came up with this concept, Mueller and Greenberg and whatnot. Greenberg is the one that called it Afroasiatic. Alright. I'm pretty sure there might be some more good stuff in here, but I don't think I want to spend any more time on this. Alright. So this paper right here is the social stratification or stratification without genetic differentiation at the site of Kulubnarti in Christian period Nubia. So we get into the whole DNA, biblical DNA, like we're getting the concept of who they belong to. So they tested some samples from the Christian period groups, the Nile Valley. So 66 individuals from the site of Kulubnarti. Present-day Nubians are not directly descended from the Christian period people from Kulubnarti without additional admixture, attesting to the dynamic history of interaction that continues to shape the cultural and the genetic landscape of Nubia. Alright, genetic studies of present-day Nubians reveal a mix of sub-Saharan African and West Eurasian related ancestry, but the mixture is largely a result of the Arab conquest of the late 1st and the early 2nd millennia CE, at time during which people with West Eurasian related ancestry spread southward along the Nile through Egypt and into Nubia. Because more recent admixture events obscure our understanding of the ancestors of the people who predate these events, the analysis of paleogenomic data from Kulubnarti offers an opportunity to directly investigate the ancestry and the biological relationships of a group of pre-Islamic Nubian people. Alright. So we see the location where it was located. So it was in, I would say, directly in the middle between Lower Nubia and Upper Nubia. I would say that's directly in the middle of it. So this is important right there because the people it's talking about is the Dinka. So this West African related ancestry extended between the Nilo-Saharan speakers in West Africa, Africans. So it's talking about like the South Sudan. The South Sudan have the Dinka that are considered sub-Saharan, and they have West African related ancestry. The West Eurasian related ancestor has been present in northeastern Africa for at least 5,000 years, potentially far longer. Very, very important. Because that would actually like correlate with Clyde Winters. That's the reason why I have those articles, the titles in the slideshow, the PowerPoint, because I mean I have those downloaded and I've read them, and I mean with this it correlates that Western Eurasian related ancestry has been in Northeast Africa for at least 5,000 years, and he might be onto something with haplogroup R1. They say, therefore, an important question is whether a significant proportion of West Eurasian-related ancestry was present in Nile Valley prior to the Arab expansion, and from where such ancestry ultimately derived. While only 6 individuals were removed as genetic outliers, we note a pattern of overly dispersed heterogeneity in terms of proportion of Nilotic and West Eurasian related ancestry among the Kulubnarti Nubians, consistent with a scenario of relatively recent or ongoing admixture. Alright, so obviously I had all of this highlighted. Identifying genetic outliers of the Kulubnarti. We plot the z-score for the statistic for each individual I'm gonna just say the Narti. And blue circles represent R and S cemetery individuals respectively on the x-axis against the point estimate of West Eurasian related ancestry on the y-axis. We consider individuals to be genetic outliers. Individuals with gray were not considered outliers at the threshold set for this work. Asterisks denote lower coverage first degrees relatives of other individuals in the data set. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and scroll up for you. I mean, yeah. Ancestors similar to that in the Bronze or Iron Age Levant was likely introduced to Narti via Egypt. To obtain insight into the relative proportions of Nilotic and West Eurasian related ancestry and the source of the West Eurasian related ancestry at Narti, we again pulled individuals that this time excluding the 6 genetic outliers and applied that we selected a reference population set that allowed us to model the Narti Nubians as descended from two-way admixture between Neolithic related and West Eurasian related populations, while also differentiating between possible sources of West Eurasian related ancestry. So we used disentangle divergent strands of ancestry in ancient West Eurasians. We examined the fit of the 21 ancient populations previously used for admixture, the West Eurasians related source, and found multiple plausible solutions for two-way admixture models between Dinka and or Bronze or Iron Age people from the Levant. Who were those Bronze Age and Iron Age people of the Levant? Haplogroup J's? Yep. Sounds like they want to say it's probably mixtures with some Arabs and West Eurasians. No West Eurasian population predating the Bronze Age fit as possible sources, suggesting that the West Eurasian related ancestry in the Narti Nubians is complex and itself admixed, possibly requiring both Levantine and or Anatolian related ancestry as well as a non-trivial amount of Iranian Caucasus related ancestry, which was spread into Anatolia and Levant in the Chalcolithic and early Bronze Age. I know 2 people right now that this debunks. But yeah. And if y'all know who I'm talking about, y'all know what I'm talking about. Complex and admixed West Eurasian related ancestry at Narti is consistent with previous work showing that ancestry such as that found in Levant Neolithic related populations made a critical contribution to the genetic landscape in parts of Africa 7,000 years ago. So that's your what? Haplogroup B1B1B. Neolithic. So you see how they differentiated between the Bronze Age and the Iron Age Levantine DNA compared to the Neolithic Levantine DNA? Mm-hmm. There's a reason. We find that the only fitting model is one using the Levant Bronze Age Iron Age as a source, and we estimate that the Narti Nubians had 57.5% West Eurasian related ancestry, ultimately most like that found in Bronze or Iron Age people from the Levant. Although this ancestry was likely introduced to Nubia through ancient Egyptians. Woo! Y'all heard what I said? Ancient Egyptians. Or a group related to them. That's called a dagger. Wow. Because the ancient Egyptians and the so-called Kushites, well, the Kermites or the Egyptians were the ones that called the Kermites Kushites. So this reflects deep biological connections among populations inhabiting the Nile Valley and further confirms the presence of West Eurasian related ancestry in the Nile Valley prior to the later Arab migrations. X chromosomes. Alright. We find that 35 out of 63 individuals from both cemeteries who were not first-degree relatives sharing a maternal lineage belong to 11 mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA, haplogroups that originated and are presently distributed predominantly in where? West Eurasia. 13 individuals from both cemeteries belong to a haplogroup H2A or maternal haplogroup H2A. A European-centered mtDNA haplogroup not previously found in ancient context in Africa to our knowledge. One of these mutations was detected in a 4,000-year-old mummy from Deir el-Bershah, Egypt, also assigned to this haplogroup, raising the possibility that the presence of U5B2B5 at Narti reflects deep connections with Egypt. Other maternal DNA haplogroups including J2A2AE, R0A1, T1A7, U1A1, and U3B are also found both at Narti and in ancient Egypt because they intermingled, they mixed. U1A1, U3B, and N1B1A2 have also been identified in Bronze Age individuals from Israel and Jordan. Alright. We call Y chromosome haplogroups for 30 males from Narti, 28 of whom are not first-degree relatives that share paternal. 17 males, including 2 pairs of relatives with a shared paternal, belong to haplogroups on the E1B1B1 EM215 branch that originated in Northeast Africa 25,000 years ago and is commonly found in present-day Afro-Asiatic speaking groups. In this subset of males, this is just EV12 for those that don't know. You can just look it up. It's EV12. Was the most common haplogroup, called for a father-son pair from the S cemetery, as well as 2 unrelated individuals from the R cemetery. Of the 15 unrelated males assigned to the branches of E1B1B1, 10 were buried in the R cemetery, while 5 males from the S cemetery belonged to haplogroups on the E1B1B1 branch, and another belonged to E2A E-M41. 9 belonged to Y haplogroups with likely West Eurasian origins. All right, so that's a lot of a lot of knowledge we just got. All right, I think that's pretty much it that I wanted to highlight on that. Yep, that's just the citation sources. All right, so this one right here is the mitochondrial DNA that I found from Nubian mtDNA that they were discussing. So, like, this one was weird. How I found this one. I'm not even sure it even came, if it was part of a bigger study. If it was, I'm not sure where I have it. You could just look up the researcher IDs, but these are the ones that I found. I'm sure Hobble Tree might have them where they're located in Sudan. All right. This is I think this is very important. I'm not gonna read it. I can go over it if somebody would like me to, but I found this one important to share with y'all. It's called the Sudan National Museum in Khartoum, an illustrated guide for visitors. I found it very interesting. Kingdom of Kerma. We see how like five names for one country. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The past modern day is quite recent. It was referred to as the land of Bo Tasseti in Egyptian simply because the inhabitants of Sudan had always been skillful bowmen. It's crazy. From 2000 BC, ancient Sudan will take the name Kush in Egyptian texts and hence later in the Hebrew version of the Bible. Later. So they got it from the Egyptians. The Egyptians were the ones that called the North Sudanese Kushites. And they intermingled with each other. Last Meratic text where Kusha is the name of the kingdom. Here we go. The Greeks first discovered these populations in Lower Egypt, where they settled since 650 BC in Naucratis. They called these black people the burnt faces Ethiops that gave Ethiopia. This name will designate ancient Sudan until the Second World War. Wow, the Second World War. Mm, 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 mm. It was only much more recently that the name Ethiopia was used to designate what used to be called Abyssinia. So, there you go. The name of Sudan comes from Arabic and means the land of the black people. They try to link the Bible with, Kush, and that's just not the case. We know they did not speak the Meroitic language of the kingdom of Kush. They weren't speaking the same language. It appeared in the medieval period. It comes from the word Nubian that the Nimrites, the last Kushites, gave to their worst enemy, tribes that came from Darfur and Kordofan, and that were nevertheless related to them in terms of language and ethnicity. These tribes probably called themselves the Maghr in their own language, but the Merites gave them as slaves, that is translated Nuba in Meroitic, which has become the word Nubian. It has nothing to do with the Egyptians' word for gold, Nuba. The Egyptians didn't use the word Nubia or Nubians, but Egyptologists use it systematically even to designate the ancient peoples of Sudan, whereas Nubians proper appear much later in history. To sum up, the land of Bo, Kush, Ethiopia, Nubia, Sudan are the five names that Sudan bore. But to separate, North Sudan ain't got nothing to do with modern day Ethiopia. It was just a Greek word that represented burnt faces or black people. Like I said, this definitely is worth reading. If you get a chance, I would highly recommend reading all of this. I don't think I'm still done reading this, but it's just so good, and I had to get this video done, so otherwise I probably would never finish this video. Highly recommend this article. Mm-mm-mm. And if you want to, if you can't find it out, you can find my email on my about on YouTube on the website version of YouTube. You can just email me and ask me or just if you want to, you can just comment on this video in your email asking me to send you this file PDF, and I'll do so. Alright. West Asian sources of the Eurasian component in Ethiopians, a reassessment. I brought this one up because it's interesting. I'm not going to go over it. It's just, I figured it'd be important to share. But talks about the Iron Age populations that brought a extended Eurasian component to Northeast Africa. So, yep, I figured it's important to have on this video. I forgot what this one's for. This is another one that I found. Oh, it's about the language. Encyclopedia of the Meroitic language. These Napatan transcriptions in Egyptian paved the way for the emergence of a local writing around the second half of the 3rd century BCE. And the closest language to Meroitic is actually Egyptian. I mean, it makes sense since they were intermingling. They were marrying with each other. Cool. Let me see, I think. And this is the the paper that I got that depiction from, the map of the Garden of Eden, the rivers. Has the Garden of Eden been located at last? Yeah, that's the map I got. Interesting read. All right, so all right. So a lot of people don't know this, but the Egyptians definitely were intermingling with each other, though Kush had developed many cultural affinities with Egypt, such as the veneration of Amun. The royal families of both kingdoms often intermarried. Kushite culture was distinct. Egyptian art distinguished the people of Kush by their dress, appearance, and even method of transportation. This citation is null and void. So if anybody has this article, please let me know. I'm definitely curious about getting this one. Another one is this one. I'm not paying for the time, so I can't get this one. But this is the one I really want. The Egyptians were the first to identify Kerma as Kush, and over the next several centuries, the two civilizations engaged in intermediate warfare, trade, and culture exchange. So definitely, I don't pay for this one. So if somebody does, could you please be so kind and send this to me in my email? Because like I said, I don't pay for this. So all right. Well, I think that's all she wrote. Pretty sure I'm done with this video. So just if you like this video, this content, just please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. And if you find some flaws in my videos, just please let me know. Your comments are gonna help me become better at doing these videos, and I appreciate your feedback. Thank you. All right, this is a bonus clip. This is from the video on YouTube, Yemen and Saudi Arabia, the descendants of the Queen of Sheba. Uploaded from Muslim Mom. All right, if you go to the comment sections, you could probably do sort by new or something. You can find I tagged with some the time of what to watch, but go ahead and play these for y'all.
The Yemeni, said to have descended from the Sheba civilization, take great pride in their roots.
Y'all heard that?
Yet today,
they take great pride in them roots. Go ahead and play that back one time.
The Yemeni, said to have descended from the Sheba civilization, take great pride in their roots. Yet today, they are living a harsh existence.
All right, go to the next one.
The legendary Queen of Sheba. She is said to have held a monopoly over the frankincense trade from which an enormous kingdom was built. She was written about in both the Bible and the Quran. About 3,000 years ago, it is said that the Queen of Sheba visited King Solomon, who reigned over Jerusalem, to question his wisdom. On her visit, she led her own camel caravan and brought vast quantities of frankincense as a gift. The people of Jerusalem were amazed at her wealth. The king and queen, who grew to admire each other after engaging in a battle of wits, fell in love, and the two countries formed friendly relations. A beautiful queen of incomparable intelligence. Painters of all ages and countries have sought to capture the archetypal queen and depict her image. evidence of the legendary queen's actual existence, however, has been discovered. There is also much speculation as to where the queen had lived. Many myths about the queen have emerged in various regions, not only in Yemen, but also in Ethiopia and northern Arabia.
Oh, wow.
Her existence and whereabouts are one of the great mysteries of ancient history.
Yeah, you ain't got no proof she existed outside of the Bible, that's why. The only proof you got is these Yemenites dancing around, being proud to be descendants of Sheba. Alright, and go to the last one.
We encounter a group of camels in the desert. The man leading the group is a Bedouin, a desert dweller. Bedouins have kept their traditional nomadic ways, moving about the desert in search of grazing land. It is believed that Bedouins once acted as guides for frankincense caravans on account of their knowledge of the desert. We called on the master of the camel herd.
السلام كيف الحال؟ مساكم طيبين؟ حياكم الله. عليكم السلام. حياكم الله.
There are 3 generations of 16 people living in this tent. The patriarch of the family is Muhammad Asaili, age 70. While their fellow Bedouin have gradually relocated and settled into towns, they have adamantly preserved their traditional lifestyle.
والله انا ضايق من اكل العج ومن مقعد في ويجينا القيض ويجينا حر ويجينا لا عندنا مكيفات ولا عندنا شيء، لكن لقدني بدوي وانا ذا عمري وشايب وفي البداوه تشجعني حلالي والحياه والمطر، ما احس ان عاد لي ولد في نفسي، احس اني ولد. هذا يدي سلام متوخر ولا لا سلامها من احسن شيء.
Muhammad keeps about 50 camels. In Saudi Arabia, camels are popular as recreational animals. Thus, camels with good fur can command a price of more than $10,000.
Whoo! $10,000.
There is one daily refreshment that Muhammad cannot do without: freshly squeezed camel's milk.
I don't know about all that.
هذا يحط الشاي بولد. اللبن هذا يحط الشاي بولد.
He playing. No.
هذا لبن النوق. أنت اسمع أحلى ما نذوق. لبن النوق أحلى ما نذوق. امنحه.
Nah, I'm going to hand pass on that one.
A man who was born in the desert, dwells with camels, and will return to the desert soil after death. Desert tribesmen have maintained their traditional life despite the flow of modernization.
All right. Yeah, just just let me know, how you feel, like how you feel that the Yemenites or the Yemen and the Saudi Arabians claim descendants of Sheba, and I'm saying, just let me know how y'all feel about that. All right, appreciate y'all.